Thank you for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and the topic today, eliminating inequality in America. Here to talk with us, Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation. Just 2 years in the job, he has drastically overhauled the foundation's giving to concentrate on the roots, not just the symptoms, of poverty and discrimination. As Darren wrote in the New York Times at the end of 2015, we Americans are a remarkably big-hearted people, but I believe the purpose of our philanthropy must not only be generosity, but justice. Managing $12 billion in assets, giving away $500 million a year, that makes Darren Walker one of the most powerful people in America, if not on the planet. Darren, thank you so much for being with us today.
Carol, thank you for having me here, and I'm so honored to be your guest and to be on your new program.
Our first guest, because I thought this was the place to start.
Well, thank you. There's no journalist in America more qualified to lead this program, and I'm just honored to be with you.
Well, thank you so much. I am enthralled with your life story, the trajectory, because here you sit at the top of this enormous foundation now, giving away billions and billions of dollars, and started in a completely different way. Tell us a little bit about your life's beginnings.
Well, my story is an American story. And the story begins with my birth in a charity hospital in Lafayette, Louisiana. My mother lived not far from that town and grew up there. It was a very poor place. And fortunately for me, my mother had the fortitude and the determination that her children would not live in poverty. And she moved us, my sister and myself, to a little town in Texas where she had family called Ames, Texas.
And then one day a lady knocks on the door looking for children to go to school, and you wind up being in the very first class of Head Start as it was getting underway. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, a very nice young woman approached the porch of this little shotgun house that we lived in 1965 and asked my mother if she could enroll me in a new government program to help students like me, boys and girls like me, get a head start on their education. And of course, my mother immediately said yes. And thus my journey with knowledge and reading and learning began.
And the Ford Foundation was a sponsor of that particular program as well, and now here you are running the foundation. But now, you were very lucky to run into a teacher in the third grade who actually set you straight on your path, because otherwise I have a feeling that the life story of Darren Walker would have been slightly different.
Well, Mrs. Majors, my third grade homeroom teacher, did have probably the misfortune of having me in her class, because I was a rather, shall we say, hyper student. And
well, you had a lot, you were thinking about a lot. You had a lot of things to get done, Darren, right?
Well, I was very active, let's just say that. And I think after one of my outbursts, she took me aside and gave me a very stern lecture. And what she said to me was that little boys like me, if we act out too much, we get taken off of the track and get put into special education or get put into a remedial program because our energy is often mistaken for a lack of ability. And she said I needed to do what she called exercise self-control.
I love the way she phrased that, right?
She said, you've got to learn to control yourself.
Well, the amazing thing was that in the third grade, you actually then began to do that. You know, I'm not sure that most third graders would get what she was talking about and actually be able to put it into action.
Well, I realized that I had to,
right,
because I started to see what was happening in my own family, my cousins, boys who were brighter than I, boys who I looked up to, started to get in trouble for petty things, for small violations. And yet these small violations yielded outcomes for them that in many ways changed the trajectory of their lives. And regrettably, 7 of my cousins ended up in prison. And one of them actually killed himself in prison. Thinking about his future, he decided to take his own life. And so I was very lucky. They weren't lucky because they remained in that small town where my mother lived and grew up, and where they remained a racialized system of exclusion, particularly of black men and boys.
Well, you're often described as the perfect example of philanthropy and government programs working, because there was first Head Start, then there were Pell Grants that allowed you to go to college, you went to law school, you became an investment banker. So this is definitely a different trajectory than the rest of your cousins. And then at a certain point, after making all of that money, you decided that you wanted to give out the money. And so talk with us a little bit about your decision to go into the foundation work.
Well, I never sought a career in philanthropy. Actually, I had left Wall Street and was working at the Abyssinian Development Corporation in Harlem during the 90s.
And did wonderful work there.
It was an exciting time to be in Harlem, because Harlem looked at that time very different than it does today. It's hard to imagine that there was a time in our recent history when people actually didn't want to live in Harlem.
I know. I don't know whether we need to blame you for the gentrification going on there or not, Darren.
This is something, Carol, that we thought long and hard about.
Right.
Be careful what you wish for, because ultimately the concern that we had, which was ensuring that incumbent residents didn't lose out, that our work didn't result in their losing their homes, but in fact that we would be creating more opportunities for homes, more opportunities for jobs. Right. And so that did happen, but there,
but it was you were overtaken.
We have to be clear that ultimately gentrification is a problem and a challenge.
Yeah, and as we see it all over our city now. But
indeed. So philanthropy. I received a call one day at Abyssinian Development Corporation from someone saying, "I've given your name to the president of the Rockefeller Foundation, and he may call." And he, in fact, did call. And I found myself in his office. Sir Gordon Conway is his name. And he hired me in 2001 to basically lead the Rockefeller's U.S. program, which at that time was focused significantly on community development, which is what I was doing in Harlem.
Right, exactly. And from there, you were drafted to the Ford Foundation. You're only the 10th president in all of this time that the foundation has been in existence. And as you walked through the door and you said, or at least what it seems you said was that it's not working here. You know, we need to change things, and we need to focus on inequality, and this is how we're going to do it. So when I heard that Darren Walker was attacking inequality, I said, well, I really want to know how he's going to do that. So you've gone through a whole transformation. You have a wonderful website now that explains a lot of what's going on. And you have identified at the Ford Foundation 5 drivers of inequality. Most people would say there's only one, and that's racism, or sexism in that category. But you've identified 5. Let's talk just a little bit about it, and then I want to show a clip of a part of your campaign. The first one is entrenched cultural narratives. What does that mean exactly?
We are a nation that rests our identity on narratives. Narratives of American exceptionalism, for example, is a part of who we are as a country. We also have narratives about people. So, for example, there are narratives about why so many African American men and women are in prison. Is it because that they are more likely to be criminals? Is it because there is some pathology about us that results in our being imprisoned at 3 times the rate of whites? Those narratives are pernicious in our society. We also have narratives by white men, for example, who say, I started with nothing. I had no advantage and no privilege, and everything that I've made on my own. When in fact, starting as a white man puts you in a position of privilege.
You've got privilege. Right.
And yet the narrative is, I had no privilege, I started with nothing, I'm a Horatio Alger story.
So the solution for that is that the Ford Foundation is going to try to change those narratives to make people understand, or to help people understand what the true circumstance is, that there is such a thing as privilege by just being white, that it's criminalization, unfair criminalization in many instances, that people wind up in prison as opposed to something inherent.
Exactly. And so we will invest in media. We will invest in documentary films and in storytelling and narratives that offer a counter narrative that actually reflects the reality of why, in fact, inequality is growing.
Right. And the next driver, you say, is access to government decision making. What are you going to do there? How can you help people actually engage? Is that politics? Is that running for office? Is that voting? What?
It is, in fact, about participation in our democracy, in our democratic processes. So we support nonprofits working to ensure, for example, that more Americans vote, that ensure that efforts to keep Americans from voting aren't allowed to happen. And so when we see efforts to place barriers to access to the polls, we support those organizations who are seeking to fight that.
And there was a lot of that going on in recent history. So you've got a lot of work to do in that regard, turning over a lot of voting rights possibilities. Failure to invest, protect education, natural resources.
Public goods. The idea that the things that are publicly owned are under siege, are being privatized. So whether we're talking about calls to privatize national parks, efforts to, in many ways, harm public schools, public housing, public parks, public libraries, it's as if the things that are at the core and center of our Commonwealth, those public goods, are being disinvested in.
So you believe in public schools as opposed to charter schools?
Well, charter schools are public schools, just to be clear. So it's not to diminish or marginalize charter schools. They're important, but they're not in and of themselves the solution. They are part of the solution.
Now, rules of the economy, as a former investment banker, that's just the way it is. You make money, money makes money, and it's really hard for people who are not in that system to get a leg up. How will you fix that?
Well, and first of all, it's important for us to be a little humble here. We're not going to fix this.
You're not going to fix it.
We are hopefully, through the work of our grantee partners, contributing to solutions. And in the case of the economy, we understand that there are systems and policies that set up the rules of the game for our economy. And those rules are often privileged those who are already privileged. And so what we need is to have rules of the game that level the playing field, so that we have more competition and less monopoly, that small businesses have an opportunity to flourish in our economy, and that people who are benefiting the most would be those who pay the most in taxes and the most in returns on those dollars to the public.
A quick question about Black Lives Matter, though. I mean, many of us were surprised during the last year of how effective that campaign was. And I guess we should describe it as loosely organized under the hashtag Black Lives Matter. College presidents resigned, police officers were indicted, police commissioners resigned. In a way, it was almost as if that kind of activity was more effective than everything else that we've been trying to do. Where do you place the Black Lives Matter movement in terms of the work that you're trying to get done?
Well, we believe that what the young people who have organized Black Lives Matter are doing is essential. First, they are asking the question, do Black lives matter as much as white lives? And they're doing that. And while it is, to many people, offensive almost, they are recognizing a historical fact that black lives in American history have not mattered as much as white lives. And they are asking, and that's a fact.
So you're
And
supportive.
they're simply asking that fact today. And we believe that question, they're asking that question.
Right.
We believe that question should be asked.
So are they
And so
assisting your efforts? Or
well,
you
we are
assisting
assisting their efforts. We support organizations who are part of the
Right.
movement to bring greater racial justice and equality in our society.
Well, speaking of equality, you have a fantastic new campaign, social media campaign, with Gloria Steinem and Brian Stevenson, Ai-jen Poo, really terrific leaders of this current day, including Elton John. Let's take a look at this video that's up on your website now.
I'm very adamant that everybody should be treated on an equal basis. Inequality drives me crazy. I was born 69 years ago into a relatively conservative society in the 50s. And we've come a long way since then, but we have an awful long way to go. The AIDS epidemic originally started from stigma. If you prevent people from getting the medicine they need, the disease is going to explode, as it did. It's the stigma we need to get rid of. Stigma if you're gay, stigma if you're black, stigma if you're of a different religion. Inclusiveness is what we have to try and aim for. Inequality in any shape or form is our biggest problem that we face on the earth today. But I have great faith in the new generation of young people. Be who you are and be proud of who you are. And in generations to come, people can live with a joyous feeling of knowing that whoever they are, whatever they are, they can be loved for who they are.
This is a wonderful campaign. It's part of the narrative, right? Changing the way people feel about this whole issue. You're using some people that you've supported or who support your efforts. And I know that you talk about on your website, the 3 I's, institutions, individuals, and ideas. What do you think has been most effective? I know that Martin Luther King was a recipient of Ford Foundation money. Gloria's work was as well. Are you deciding now that people are more important than institutions, or are they all equal on the same plane?
Well, the process of social change, Carol, is about the 3 I's and how they interact and interrelate. So we don't have institutions without people. And so I don't choose to think of them in siloed ways or in binaries. We need to invest in people. We need to invest in young leaders like Gloria Steinem and Carol Jenkins when they're early in their careers. Right. We need to support the institutions that they are building. So today, Ai-jen Poo and the National Domestic Workers Council, a new, young, amazing woman working courageously to organize domestic workers in a new organization, the National Domestic Workers Council.
She's fantastic.
She's fantastic. And there are hundreds of people like her across America and many more around the world. And our job is to make sure that the doors of the Ford Foundation are open to those amazing, courageous people and their ideas for the kinds of institutions they want to build. And today, they're not all institutions in the traditional way. Many of them, organizations like Color of Change, are virtual. They don't want to have a staff with 50 people. They want to have a more virtual presence. And so we're looking at the different modalities for social change, which look a little different than they did 50 years ago.
In this reorganization, is it true that there are about 800 organizations that will not be funded going forward because they could not be linked specifically to fighting inequality?
Well, there are a number of organizations, I wouldn't say 800, but there are a number of organizations that we will be transitioning out of our portfolio because we are taking a singular perspective that everything that we support has to address one of those 5 drivers, and that needs to frontally embrace the idea that we're fighting inequality. And when I say we're fighting inequality, let's be clear. I don't mean that inequality has to come to an end. Even the most liberal economist will agree that some inequality in a system is appropriate because there need to be incentives. There needs to be the idea that if you work hard, that if you sacrifice, there will be a payoff. What we have today is an extreme version of inequality that we have not seen in our history,
Ever.
maybe.
Ever, probably.
And so, as a civilized, enlightened society, we should be offended and we should be worried. In America, the core of who we are, the thing that our entire society and democracy rests on, is the simple notion of opportunity. Inequality asphyxiates opportunity. It's harmful to opportunity. And so for a young boy in 1965, on that porch of that little shotgun house, there was a mobility escalator for me. There was opportunity because we were becoming a more equal society. And so boys like me actually could dream, could aspire. What I worry about today, Carol, is that boys like me don't have dreams and aspirations because the idea of ending up as a lawyer on Wall Street for a young black boy today is so remote, is so far-fetched an idea that they don't even dream it.
So you're actually, that dream, you want to replace that ability to dream is one of the things that you're hoping to do for the boys and the girls.
Absolutely.
Because we always have to include, many people talk about black boys and boys of color, whatever, but we have to remember that the girls and the women, the net wealth of a black woman in America today is like $5. As opposed to thousands of dollars for non-women of color, $5 that you could say that's her wealth because she's raising children and has no bounce, no leeway whatsoever. So let's include the girls and the women in that, but that you're replacing the dream.
Well, and I think you're right about being inclusive. And we should also recognize that there are more poor whites in America, more working class whites in America. So this is no longer a challenge just for African Americans and Latinos. We have a system that is producing bad outcomes for more Americans. And the opportunity is for us to reach across racial lines, across class and gender lines, and to come together in a movement to demand that America be America, that the opportunity that this nation represents be fulfilled and be allowed to flourish, because it isn't flourishing today, and that's potentially profoundly problematic for this country. It could mean the end of our democracy, and I don't believe I'm being hyperbolic.
When you say that, you believe that
I truly believe that if we lose hope in the future in this country, this is the one thing we've always had, a belief that our future would be better than our past, and a belief that no matter where you are from and who you are, that you can get on that mobility escalator and you can ride it as far as you want to ride it.
Right,
that mobility escalator today has stopped for too many Americans.
We're near the end of our program, and one of the things that we ask all of our guests is to complete the sentence, which starts, "The strength, the power of Black America lies in." How would you finish that?
The strength and power of Black America lies in the souls and the spirits of little black girls and boys in the rural far reaches of America, in the courtyards of public housing projects in our big cities, in those first ring suburbs that are increasingly comprised of people of color, Our power and our future resides in them. And my question for America is, what are we doing to ensure that those spirits, their humanity flourishes, that their potential to be vital participants in our great democracy is realized?
Wow. Well, thank you so much for that. And I thank you for your efforts at the Ford Foundation on ending inequality. It's an inspirational task that you're taking on, and we wish you the best. And we will have you back and to track how your success is moving along in that effort. You've given us a lot to think about, and thank you so much, Darren Walker, for being on Black America Today.
Thank you, Carol. It's been my great privilege.
And we will see you all the next time. Thank you.